Welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Bob Sellers here with Heather Childers. CNN anchor Jake Tapper threatening to ban some Republicans from his show. Tapper making the comments during a panel discussion alongside hosts John Berman and Brianna Keeler.
If one side of the argument is not willing to stick to standards and facts for a whole host of reasons, one of them is, how am I supposed to believe anything they say? If they're willing to lie about Joe Biden wanting to steal your hamburgers and QAnon and the big lie about the election, what are they not willing to lie about? Why should I put any of them on TV?
Well, that is part of a journalist's job, is to hold them accountable. So we put liberally minded people on our show. Why would somebody like that essentially censor those who think differently? I'm going to start with a guy that I'm convinced knows how to set a high pick and roll and set a screen and run a high pick and roll, because at East Tennessee State, he sure knew how to play football. I'll tell you that right now, 4-year scholarship. So I'm guessing somewhere in the background there's a little basketball as well, Derrick.
Well, a little bit. I was always the last person picked for basketball. Anyway.
Well, you were one of the first picked for football, though, right?
For football. They just picked me for basketball to make the teams even. But it's just, I thought with Jake Tapper, I was surprised to hear that, because, quite frankly, I thought Republicans were already banned from his show. But but it's unfortunate that that's what he's thinking, because, to me, there were some shenanigans that went on with this election. Whether you believe it, there were. And so for me, when people say that we're going to ban people from coming on and talking about it, it's almost like, what do you have to hide? Because there were some things that went on, and I think eventually it's going to come out. And so, again, we need to continue to talk about it so that it does not take place again in 2022 and come 2024.
Yeah, and I'll go to Chuck in my great home state of Virginia. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, listen, when does opinion have a standard? This is probably unlike a pick and roll. You have someone who doesn't want you on his show unless you follow a certain standard. It ought to be a badge of honor not to be on that show. I think at the end of the day, this is nothing but Soviet-style political opposition. They don't want anybody there that doesn't fall in the Democratic woke line. And so, from my perspective, I think it ought to be a good thing that Republicans don't go on that show. They're not looking for anything other than ratings, period.
Yeah, it does sound like he's taking a position on the issues going into it, Heather. And so purposely, he doesn't want to bring out a different perspective, because I think journalists' jobs are to challenge certain perspectives.
Right, and so he should be prepared with, his rebuttal. He should know what's going to come at him, and that if he has a problem with it, he should have facts to be able to counter that. But apparently, he doesn't have that ability. And I find it pretty interesting that CNN had hired Kayleigh McEnany, if anyone remembers back in the day. She was a CNN contributor. Tucker Carlson had a show on CNN that I don't think people remember. And then I was just watching last night, Brian Stetler got his start on that overnight Greg Gutfeld show that was on Fox News. So there's people going back and forth between all of these channels.
Yeah, your thoughts on this, Jesse?
Well, it's kind of funny to hear Jake Tapper talk about telling the truth when CNN has been proven to continually perpetuate the Russian hoax, the collusion hoax. I don't know that they ever came out and apologized for that. How many times have they come out and tried to fact check the things that we all know turned out to not be true? Did they cover the Hunter Biden laptop scandal? No. And if they did, it was so few seconds applied to it. They didn't want to influence the election. They have members of their own team stating that they were there to make sure that Donald Trump did not win the election. So when we want to talk about integrity, there is none over at CNN. And Jake Tapper himself is a Democratic strategist, people. He worked as a spokesperson for a congressional member out of Pennsylvania, and he worked on gun control with the Brady Center to protect against gun violence. The man is a far lefty. So when he wants to sit there and try to proclaim what is truth, working for a network that never wanted to address the real truth, I find that just really hypocritical and funny, humorous.
Can I bring something up, though?
Sure.
Because you just reminded me of that. Does anyone remember the person that they had inside the Capitol on January 6th, and they paid for that person's video, who was with someone who was a reporter from CNN? You know, they did that and were willing to do that. So it's really disingenuous that they can't have Republicans on and have the ability to argue with them, but they would do something like that.
I'm going to return to something else, Jesse. I hope you don't mind. You were very emotional when you were talking about mission creep in Afghanistan. I don't know if you served in Afghanistan or Iraq, but you're obviously very passionate about this. And this is an argument going on that we're pulling out. But I talked to somebody over the weekend, spent a lot of time, 2 tours there, and says, just like you're saying, it's time to get out, especially out of a country like that.
Well, when you have our focus was to remove and ensure that the Taliban did not take over Kabul, we accomplished that mission. And when I hear advocates who work with Liz Cheney, there is a Republican who had served over there. His name escapes me right now. He is actually, he had served several tours, and he advocates for it. And all of their talking points, if you really listen to them, are exactly what they said 20 years ago. We don't want them coming over here. We don't want to see a rise of al-Qaeda. We don't want to see the Taliban rise. And now they're throwing ISIS in there, although ISIS is based in, Syria and Iraq.
That's right. It's Taliban.
So really are trying to put fear in the American people. When you're talking about people coming back not in body bags, I think you need to take this very seriously. What have we not accomplished? Now they try to suggest that it would be a forward deployment spot to watch China. I'm sorry, that's mission creep. 20 years later, I did not serve in Afghanistan or Iraq, but I have many friends who did, and I know too many men and women who have been traumatized by those experiences. We have to show something for it by this point, and as of now, I think our mission is accomplished, and it's time to come home.
Thank you for your thoughts and your passion about it, Jesse Jane. I appreciate it. And for your service. Jesse Jane Duff, Chuck Smith, Derrick Hollie, thank you all on our panel. We'll be back with more of American Agenda after this.